how to stop living paycheck to paycheck. You know, there are a lot of people that are living paycheck to paycheck right now, and if you're one of those people, then this video is for you. I think I found something that can help you, and this isn't going to be a step-by-step guide or a tutorial or a 10-step program on how you can get out of debt, but this is one key, just one simple thing that you can do in your life that will change everything. And to explain that, I want to go into a little bit of my origin story, so stick with me. To start off, first thing I want to address are the causes of why people are living paycheck to paycheck, because I think we have to get something out of the way before we go into the fix. Why people are living paycheck to paycheck is a really good question, and I think there are a number of reasons why, but they fall into two categories: the things you can control and the things you can't control. So first I want to start with the things we can't control. Things like medical costs, the cost of living, inflation, low wages. Those are all big issues that in general you don't have a lot of control over. We can't determine what the cost of a loaf of bread is, and you've got to have some kind of health insurance or health coverage, and those are just things that are almost impossible to change. They're big issues, and a lot of people like to point to those issues because they can't change them, and they use that as almost a distraction. It's a talking point. It becomes politicized. And I do believe there are ways to address those issues, but that's not what I'm talking about here today. What I'm talking about are the things we can change. So those are all the things that we can't really do too much about, but then there's the things we can do things about. And that includes controlling your spending and not overspending, budgeting, living within your means. And those are all important issues, and there's a lot of great information out there about, 10 steps to live within your means, having emergency funds, having medical insurance. All those things are important, but that's not what I want to address here in the video today. When I looked for a solution for a big one thing that I could bring everybody back to, when I started thinking about what the difference is in my life and why I'm not living paycheck to paycheck, I came down to this one thing, and it starts with my origin story. So I'm in my mid-40s now, and I'm going to stick with me here because I'm going to go all the way back to when I was 16 years old. And when I was 16, I really wanted a credit card of my own. So I convinced my mom to apply for a credit card and put me on it. And so we got my first credit card, which was a First USA Smart Visa. It had a little chip on it, and you could put it into a card reader, and it actually didn't do anything. There weren't even card readers out there in the marketplace yet, but it was a fancy gimmick, and it got a lot of people to sign up for it. But the reason I got it was I wanted a credit card, and it seemed like the right fit for me. So being a techie person, I got the Smart Visa. And I did what every person does when they first get a credit card. I went out and I started spending. And I spent and I spent, and next thing you know, the first bill comes in, and my mom knocks on my door, and she said, "Phil, your first bill came. You want to know how much it is?" And to my surprise, it was $1,500. Now, to a 16-year-old, that's like saying $1 million. I was just blown away. I hadn't kept track of my spending, I hadn't paid attention, and I just racked it up like people do when they get a credit card. But that is not what shook me. What really was a turning point in my life at that moment was the fact that my mom said, "Okay, now you have to pay the bill, and if you don't pay the bill, you're responsible for the interest and the fees." And that stopped me dead in my tracks, because the last thing I wanted to do was give away my hard-earned money to a bank. So I said at that moment in time that I would pay back the bill as soon as possible, and I would never let that happen again. And from the rest of my life, I've never had a bill carry over more than a month. And I'm very grateful for the fact that I can say that. But it also took diligence, and it took responsibility, and I had a lot of good things work in my favor, and I'm very blessed, and I'm grateful for that. But that's part of the origin story, so stick with me. Second thing, after that occurred, I started to realize the power of interest. Not just what it could cost you, but what it could make you. So I applied for a different credit card when I was more responsible. I got an American Express, and they'd just come out with the Optima card, which was like it was a cashback card, and that was becoming popular at the time. And I realized that for every dollar I spent, I got 1 or 2% back, and it was just like free money to me. So I was like, who wouldn't do this? Well, there's a good reason. there's a good reason why a lot of people don't do that, and that's because if you get caught up in the overspending, yeah, that can affect you. But I, at that point, had learned my lesson, and I decided to take that on as kind of a hobby. So I used that to my advantage, and I used that American Express, and I paid it off every month. And at the end of the year, I think my first year, I got $200 or $300 in cash back. So I learned the lesson that interest can work for you or against you. Fast forward a couple years, my wife and I got married fairly young. She was 19 and I was 20, and we moved to Florida to go to school together. And we didn't have jobs. We were just getting started out in life. We really didn't have too much to speak of. We had a very, very small cushion. But the bottom line was, had to get work quickly, and we had to start making money, and we really had to tighten our belt. So we did. And I brought in that credit card style of spending with me for the points, used that as kind of our method of payment for things. And in order to remain responsible for that, I had to keep close track of everything that we spent in order to not overspend. And so my wife actually got a job before I did. I was working as a work study for the school. Eventually, we both got hired by the school, and we made a pretty small salary. And so we had to live within our means, and we became responsible very early on. And I started doing the accounting. So it was my job to balance the checkbook, write the checks, pay the bills, etc., etc. And because of my past experiences with credit cards and the fact that we had a pretty limited income, my idea was, first of all, we had to keep track of everything we spent. And in those days, it wasn't like you had an app or a website you could really log into. I mean, you could log into American Express, but sometimes it was delayed in when you could see things, so it took a little time. That meant keeping the receipts and tracking like every penny that we spent. And that began a responsibility of keeping track of everything. In addition to that, something else I determined was the best course of action for us was not doing auto pay. And I know a lot of people out there do auto pay. In fact, I do auto pay now. And I want to say right from the get-go, this is not a video against auto pay. This is actually a pro auto pay video, but there's a reason why that affected my thinking. And the reason is because I didn't want to pay a bill that the money wasn't in the account for. So in order to pay a bill, when the bill came in the mail, I went on and I manually set up the payment. That meant that I had already gone through the process of knowing if the money was going to be in the account. So that's kind of how we set up our finances at the beginning. It worked really well for many years. It wasn't actually until maybe 10 years ago, so about 15 years into our life together, that I went ahead and set up auto pay. But before that time, it was all done manual payments. Bill comes in, I go online, I initiate the payment, and then it would withdraw on the day that it was set to be paid. And the reason I did that was because I didn't want to overdraft my checking account. And I also didn't think that leaving a bunch of money in a checking account was necessarily a good idea, because I had actually had someone take a check and wipe out my account at one time. A friend of mine had done that. And I kind of learned a lesson there that you don't want to leave too much, you don't want to leave more than you need in your checking account. Plus, it's not earning interest, and that was something else I was aware of. So fast forward a couple years to 2012, and a coworker pointed out an app called Mint, which is now called Credit Karma, but it gave you the ability to track all of your accounts in one place. And being the financial thinker that I was, and finance was kind of like a hobby to me, the money was kind of like a hobby. So I thought, wow, what a great tool. Right on my phone, I can see every account, every savings account, stock market account, investing account, all in one place, all at the click of a button. It was perfect. You know, I almost got a little obsessed with it because you can see your net worth and then you start to kind of gamify that. And I don't recommend doing that, especially if you have a lot of anxiety, because every day that thing's going to change and you don't want to live like that. You know, you want to check it occasionally, but once a month, maybe once a year even is fine. But anyway, I used that app and I enjoyed it. So that's kind of the origin story, and I'm getting to the point of this. And the point is, and I got to go to Dave Ramsey for this one, it's the same reason, the key to changing whether you're living paycheck to paycheck is the same reason Dave Ramsey says don't use credit cards. Pay cash for everything. At least the last time I checked, that was kind of his advice. I think that's the common held belief that Dave Ramsey is kind of anti-debt, which I understand that. And he's also anti-credit card, which I'm against that. Because if you remember in my origin story, how I talk about using credit cards and gamifying the points. I mean, I can even tell you, I've gone to Hawaii for free. Our family of 5 didn't pay a dime. In fact, they paid us to go to Hawaii because of the credit card points and the miles and the points. It's kind of a hobby of mine. Maybe I'll go into that in a video at some point, but for the point of this video, Dave Ramsey was kind of the enemy in that territory for me. But he was the enemy for one thing, but I get it why he said another thing. There's a kind of a friction that occurs when you spend money in cash. When you're using a card, you're not really paying attention to it. I got caught up in that early on. And his point is if you can't control your spending, then don't use a credit card. But it's also that cash has friction. And with friction means you actually have to think about what you're doing. You take a step back for a moment. Do I really need this item? I think he got that part right. And that's the point of this video. What I think he's wrong about is about using credit cards at all. I actually disagree with him on that, and this is the reason why. At some point you have to develop financial maturity, just like everything, just like learning how to drive, just like learning anything, you start to develop a skill for that. It's like exercise, you know, you build muscle. You're never going to build the muscle to function in everyday life if you don't learn how to use a credit card properly. It would be like an alcoholic being told you can never go anywhere that has alcohol. You wouldn't even be able to get on an airplane. You have to at some point develop the muscles for that. And you might have a problem, but you have to learn tools of how to deal with that. And not everybody is a credit card person, so I'm not saying that. But what I am saying is that you do have to develop the responsibility, and I think where he's wrong, this is just my personal opinion, where he's wrong about it is you never develop that personal responsibility. If you tell people credit cards are evil, they're the devil, you know, that's not always the case. You got to learn how to deal with debt. Debt is a tool that business people use. And you can use it responsibly, you can use it to your advantage, but just like anything dangerous, use it responsibly. Learn how to use it. So I think he's wrong about that, but what he's right about is the cash. And not for the reason of just controlling your spending, but it has to do with this. And this is the point of the video right here. Awareness. If you look at what people are living paycheck to paycheck, ironically, a lot of them also have auto pay set up, which is something I didn't have set up. And this is where this whole video started, because when I started to look into this and I started to think, why is it I'm different? What's different about me? I'm human. I'm a red-blooded American just like the rest of us here. I'm a regular guy. What's different about me that I'm not in the 60%? And when I really started to break it down, I realized that one of the differences is awareness. When you set up auto pay on a credit card, it makes it that much easier just to spend it and it comes right out of your account. All of a sudden, before you know it, you spent enough that it's just coming out of your account every month. Then you add on the idea that there isn't enough awareness about what you're spending if you decided not to check what you're spending normally. See, you used to get receipts, and you still can get a receipt, but you used to have to add those things up. You used to have to take a lot more manual attention to your expenses. And so what's happened over time is things have gotten a lot easier. Now you can go to the store, you tap your phone, you walk out the door, you don't even need to get a receipt. You don't even think about the bill payment coming out of your account. Things are just happening. And lifestyle creep occurs. And then next thing you know, you're way, way, way over your skis. I think that's the term. Over your skis, you're way out there. And then next thing you know, you're living paycheck to paycheck. In my own life, I never experienced that because at each step of the way, something just a little different occurred, and it set a series of, it set something in motion that changed my entire outcome to where now I'm not living paycheck to paycheck. And so this is what I wanted to explain to you today is there's a really simple little difference that you can make right now to change your situation, and that is to introduce awareness. So here's a solution for you with awareness. And first of all, I'm not telling anybody to change their auto pay. In fact, I think automation is a good thing. I think you should automate your savings, automate your bill payments, use the tools that are out there to make things simpler, but reintroduce the awareness a different way. Use those apps that are out there, whether it's a banking app or whether it's something like Mint no longer exists. Now it's Credit Karma, but you can use something like Empower. You can look for all those, but my point is not the specific app, but find an app that works for you, whether it's a specific bank that does everything that you need to do, where you can log in and you can see all of your expenses, everything that you've paid out, like a credit card, and your balances and where everything stands, so you can become aware of what's going on. The awareness is the key. That's the differentiator in what my situation was, at least I think so. Because as I was aware of things, I was making different decisions along the way. And 25 years into this, I have a whole different outcome than a lot of people, to where I was able to build up a savings, to where I was able to contribute to my retirement funds, to where I was able to do things and start to live debt free. The awareness gave me the tools. And so first thing you could do is download an app, something like Empower, or I think there's You Need a Budget, YNB. Find a tool that works for you, find the one that you think is reasonable, and use it. Use it to become aware of the situation you're in, to see what your spending is. And then the second thing is, do a check-in with yourself. Now what I do is I kind of tabulate my receipts of anything outside of my normal budget for extra expenses and things. I do that about once a week, and then once a month I sit down and I go through the bills that are going to be deducted out of the account automatically, which is the same thing I've done for the last 25 years. And I use an Excel spreadsheet for it, but you can use other apps for it, doesn't matter. But I use a Google Doc, and the Google Doc just lists all of the expenses that are going to come out of my checking account that month, and I make sure that I have enough money in the checking account so that by the end of the month, with all the income that's coming in and all of the outgo that's going out, that I don't bounce the account. And that's the reason I've always done that. I just have never wanted to bounce my account. But what that has done for me is it's given me a chance to check in on things, and then I can notice things. Do you know how many times I've logged into my credit card and I've noticed fraudulent charges? I can't tell you how many times that's happened over the years. And I have like 33 credit cards. Like I said, it's kind of like a hobby to me, so you don't have to do that. You know, I don't even recommend it necessarily. The game is sort of rigged against you, so be careful. It's kind of a fun little hobby. But I'm almost embarrassed to say I have that many credit cards, but it's the truth. And if you have that many cards, inevitably you're going to have some fraud. I can't tell you how many times during that check-in that I've found a fraudulent charge like that. And who knows how much money I would have lost over the years had I not checked on that. You have to check those statements. Even if you have to do it in paper, do it in paper. Ask them to send you a paper bill. Even if it costs you something, it might be worth it, but you don't have to do that anymore. Everything's available through the apps, the websites. Most people understand how all that works. So do that check-in once a month. If you become aware of your finances in that way, I'm telling you that your situation is going to change just out of the nature of the way things function. And this is the thing, there are all these 10-step plans, and even I have a video called The 5 Road Signs on the Road to Financial Freedom, which is a great video, by the way. But that's 5 steps, you know. You don't have to do that. All you have to do is change your thinking. Once you become aware of what's going on and you start thinking like a successful person thinks, where they're aware of these things, they're not just letting things slide over and over until the next thing they know, the friction's gone and the money just goes. And then they're living paycheck to paycheck. If you want to change that today, reintroduce the friction. Give yourself the opportunity to reevaluate your finances as things occur, and make yourself aware of what's going on in your financial life. And I guarantee you, you're not going to like some of the things you see, and you're going to begin to make the changes. And this doesn't involve you living like a monk, or, you know, giving up a latte, or complaining about a $20 burrito. Those are real problems, and I'm not saying that our costs are not a little bit too high, and inflation is definitely real. But when you become aware of it, you can control the things you actually have control of, and not just complain about the things you don't have control of. And I think that is the difference. And it will keep you a much more positive person. You'll become way less cynical. You won't always consider the system rigged. In fact, you'll see how the system can work for you if you let it. And you'll begin to use things like credit cards to your advantage, where you can take advantage of the points, take advantage of the opportunities that come along. And if that's not for you, that's fine. Some people out there can't control themselves. But I'm just saying, even if you can't control yourself, if you become aware of your situation, at least you'll recognize it and you can maybe introduce something in there that can help you. So I hope that helped you today. And if you like what you had to hear today, then please subscribe. And if you have questions about anything I said or something that our community can help you with, please mention in the comments, and I would love to discuss it with you. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe, like the video if you liked it, and we'll see you next time.